Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Glenn. This is
Michael.
Michael. We're going to talk today about buying and selling real estate a little bit. So, why don't you give us an idea, Michael, usually how a real estate deal comes about, how it starts?
So for most people, buying a home is probably one of the biggest purchases in their life, if not the biggest purchase of your life. A lot of people get a loan when they purchase that house, and most of the time people will get a 30 or 15-year mortgage. So you're tied to that property for a long time, and you want to be protected whenever you're entering into an agreement to buy that property. Typically a house goes for sale, whether that's through a realtor or for sale by owner. There is an offer on the house, an acceptance on the house, and essentially what we want to do is start negotiating the terms of that contract. So if a buyer is making an offer on a house, there's certain inspection clauses that I think are appropriate in every sale of a home. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those inspections.
I think if I was going to buy a house, I would want to get it inspected to make sure it didn't have termites, didn't have mold, didn't have issues with the electrical system, didn't have issues with air conditioner, the furnace. As we both know, houses have problems. That's kind of unavoidable for the most part, but you want to know what you're getting yourself into, I think, from the get-go, and you want to have an out in the contract that gives you the ability to rescind that contract if there are issues that come about from those inspections. So I think those inspections are very important. There's some documents that sellers of residential real estate in Illinois are required to provide to buyers. They're required to tell you things like, I've had water in my basement, or I have cracks in my foundation, things like that. They are obligated to tell you that, so you know going into the deal what you are getting into, what you are buying. And those are all things that I think it's a good idea to have an attorney that's familiar with real estate transactions review before you sign them. I think that's an important point. Have you ever been able to do much with a contract that's already signed?
Once ink is on paper, it is very hard to get out of that contract, unless there are some provisions so that there can be some inspection contingencies. So typically, if you're going to go out and get a loan to buy a piece of property, that lender, whether it's a bank or some other type of financial institute, is going to make sure that their collateral, your house, is in the shape that they believe it needs to be to get the value out of that loan. So a lot of times your lender will require a home inspection before you are going to be approved for that loan. In some situations, if a person wants to buy a house and they want to buy it for cash, they have no lender requirements, so maybe they would waive that home inspection. I always give the advice that the home inspection, if you're going to pay for it up front, it's going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of time in the future if any problems do arise. As we know, as not very experienced in the construction or in the inspection world, if we walk into a house as a normal person, we can see what the cosmetics look like, a fresh coat of paint and a fresh flooring and carpet. The house looks good, but what those home inspectors do is they go in and they really dig in and nail down the mechanics, make sure they're working properly up to the code, and essentially they check for any material defects in the home that may not be observable to an individual that's just walking in and seeing the property. So the lender is typically going to require that home inspection, but there are situations where the lender won't require it. Even then, you still should, I strongly suggest going out and getting that home inspection. Would you agree?
I agree. I think that's all good advice. I think it's good advice to have somebody that is solely responsible for representing you. I can say that Illinois law allows realtors in our state to represent both sides of a transaction. Attorneys are not allowed to represent both sides of an adverse transaction. When we represent an individual in a real estate deal or any deal, litigation, what have you, we represent one person and one person only. Our fees are not contingent on the sale closing, so it may come a time where we would advise our client, you need to rescind the contract and you need to back out because we don't particularly care if it closes or not. We care if our clients are protected. So for those reasons, I think it's important to have somebody that knows what they're doing to guide you through the process. There's some other issues out there that after the contract's signed and the ink's on the paper, if you will, that may arise that I think maybe we could talk about next time, and that's beyond the brick and mortar. That's more of the title to the real estate itself, that the house or the business or the factory sits on, that are also vitally important.
I would say the one thing I would add is Illinois and most states have a caveat that essentially they say it's buyer beware. So if you're going to make an offer on a property and you go through the inspection process, or if you waive that inspection process and you go into closing and something happens in between the time you're under contract and that closing date, if you still sign the paperwork at closing, the transaction closes, essentially Illinois law says buyer beware. It is on you as a buyer, as a purchaser of this property, to go out and do your own appropriate inspection. So the seller really doesn't have any obligations other than providing a real property disclosure, disclosing the material defects that they know of. Well, the rest of that burden is on the buyer to go out and do that due diligence and inspection before they close on that property, because most of the time these issues don't come up until months or years down the road, and by then it's way too late in the game to try to rescind a contract or try to remediate any of those problems before closing. So strongly suggest having somebody advocate for you and on your behalf and only on your behalf when dealing with any type of real estate transaction.
I agree with that. How about that KB 3-run home run last night?
Boy, that was no doubter. I think that left-handed pitcher was throwing in the upper 90s, and Chris Bryant sent it out at about 110. So
Cubs have been hot. We got a sweep of the Cardinals last weekend, and they're fun to watch.
Very fun. Should be an interesting year.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.